It feels like every fantasy show that's come out in the last 10-ish years has aspired to be the next Game of Thrones. But what does that really mean? Using a darker color palette doesn't really cut it. Netflix Avatar.
That was pretty good.
These wishful claims have led me to ask, what's the secret ingredient? What do stories like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, the Infinity Saga, Game of Thrones, Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Hunger Games, what do they all have in common that set them apart as a cultural phenomenon and god-tier storytelling? So I severed my brain and started macrodata refining some books. Now that we know what they're doing, I feel awkward about that comment. Anyway, the research. When I first read the Hunger Games books, I thought Katniss was really annoying. And yet I devoured the books and saw every movie on opening night. I was really curious what I would see on my reread. I doubted whether I'd be able to get through it the second time at all. Again, the moment I started reading, I was hooked. And in that first chapter, I found the first secret ingredient, conflict. And with it, a master class on how to use it effectively. Let's start with the first paragraph. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. Katniss assumes Prim is having nightmares, which helps us know that Prim is probably afraid of something, afraid of the story's conflict. Then the follow-up line, of course she did, helps us know Katniss is also afraid, or apprehensive at least, of this thing. Even though we don't know what the conflict is, we are already connected with our character's emotions about that conflict, and that is key. We forgive Katniss, giving us some exposition because we know it's all wrapped up in the greater conflict of the series, and we know how she feels about it, even if we aren't sure what that is yet. Katniss and Gale go off to hunt, and there is conflict between them about the state of Panem. They make fun of Effie. Everything brings us back to the main conflict of the story, until finally Primrose is chosen in the lottery, and the emotions we invested in at the beginning of this chapter are fulfilled. Here's the breakdown. Set up the emotional stakes, how the protagonist or POV character and other characters around them feel about the central conflict. Keep the narrative focused on said conflict, even if some details are only related in an adjacent manner. And then fulfill on the emotions originally presented. This pattern continues throughout this story. When new events occur, we constantly return to Katniss to learn how she feels about the new developments before the story moves on, and we get our investment in her emotions satisfied with the action or plot of the novel. Could you imagine Katniss worrying about the Hunger Games lottery and then 2 random people are chosen? Or if she's fired up to find Peeta in the arena because she's worried about him but then sits around and waits? It doesn't have the same effect. From this point on in my research, I knew what I was looking for. It's a concept called stretch that I've learned about from Angie Finnemore in the Calliope Submission Possible series. The idea is that life and story is full of opposites, conflicting ideas, or imagery that pulls at each other. Yin and yang, good and evil, life and death, black and white. I say opposites, but really it's about creating space. That's why it's called stretch. Though not opposites, there is stretch in the idea of an orphan being saved by love. Check out the link in the description for 25% off the Submission Possible series. It's been a game-changing writing program for me, and I highly recommend it. In Harry Potter specifically, I wanted to look at stretch across a story. Just off the top of my head, I can list off some examples of stretch within the series. Kid versus adult, pureblood versus muggleborn, studious characters versus characters with natural talent, dark hair versus white blonde, etc., etc. So instead, I wanted to look at how this type of overarching stretch or stretch between characters or events is utilized directly in the text. There was so much that I stopped taking notes after chapter 4, and for the sake of this video, I'm only going to go through what I found in the first chapter. For those of you who don't remember, the first chapter starts out following Vernon Dursley, who is perfectly normal. Thank you very much. Most of this section of the chapter establishes stretch between the Dursleys and magic, and we even see this in the writing itself. The word normal is followed almost immediately by mysterious. The Potters are described as un-Dursley-ish. It's pointed out that the Dursleys don't see magic. A happy stranger hugs grumpy Uncle Vernon. Then the chapter shifts from day to night. At night, Dumbledore arrives and the whole vibe of the chapter shifts and we feel the stretch. McGonagall appears and she is uptight paired with Dumbledore's calm. We learn a powerful murderer was defeated by a baby. McGonagall has a lot of negative to say while Dumbledore is all positive vibes and advice. Hagrid appears, a giant carrying a baby. Harry is famous and magical and will grow up mundane. It just goes on and on. Even Quidditch, which is a poorly constructed sport in my opinion, has stretch built into it that a team could be losing by 140 points and then win the game in a single moment. On some levels, this will appear naturally in any story. It's just part of life. But really honing in on it can create an extremely engaging narrative and wildly evocative imagery. Imagine Harry Potter was a story about a powerful wizard defeated by another powerful wizard. We almost don't care. The final secret ingredient I'm pulling from The Lord of the Rings. We're going to look at stretch again, but for The Lord of the Rings, I wanted to look at stretch within a single character. An example of this might be Frodo being lighthearted and naive when he leaves the Shire to being downtrodden and overburdened by the end.
Share the load, the load.
But I want to look at not so obvious examples and again see the stretch on the page. The main character of chapter 1 is Bilbo, so we're going to build a bit of a profile on the Hobbit. Bilbo disappeared, then returned. When he left, he was normal in the ways of finances at least, but now he's rich. He is old but has a lot of vigor. His wealth, which is typically an exhaustible resource, is described as inexhaustible. Bilbo is rich on money but poor in actual friends in the Shire. His wealth, which is physical, is also legendary, which has an intangible sense to it. Bilbo is fond of the Shire but needs a holiday. He looks young but feels old. He is supposed to and has planned to give the ring to Frodo but doesn't want to. He trusts Gandalf but then is also suspicious of Gandalf. He claims the ring as his, but in actuality found or stole it. All of this stretch built into his character sets him up as both interesting and mysterious. The final ingredient then is stretch within the individual. I used character as my example, but the same could be said for objects like a tiny ring with immense power, or tiny folk who tell tall tales. A quaint village visited by the forces of evil. The odds that I would magically write a story of epic scale that captivates readers and becomes a legend used to seem near impossible, like catching lightning in a bottle. But the Submission Possible series is narrowing those odds. Again, there's a link in the description for 25% off this amazing writing course. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.